Welcome, children of the night. Tonight, Comics FM descends into the final darkness of the Batman Vampire trilogy. Batman, Crimson Mist. The Dark Knight rises again, but not as Gotham's guardian. He returns as hunger incarnate, a blood-drinking fiend twisted by Joker's cursed veins. No humanity, no mercy, only the primal urge to tear throats and bathe the city in red. And now, the last barrier between Gotham and total slaughter lies in the trembling hands of two souls who once swore to shield the Bat, and now must find the strength to destroy him. Hit that subscribe button, sharpen your stakes, and step with me into the final nightmare. Chapter 1. Endless dreams in the limbo. To Alfred and Gordon, Bruce's rest looked almost serene, as though the war had finally left his soul. But peace was a lie. Deep within the stone womb of the crypt, Batman lay in a corpse still hush, conscious inside rotting flesh. He felt every second, a prisoner to unholy awareness. The oak splinter lodged in his chest pinned him in a cursed twilight, neither living nor fully damned. His muscles shriveled, skin tightening over bone as hunger gnawed like knives beneath his ribs. His thoughts were clear, sharp as batarangs, yet his limbs were dead clay. In the void only one instinct throbbed relentlessly, the craving to tear warm throats open and drink life's red flood. That hunger whispered at him, taunted him, promised release and blood. Above ground, Alfred jerked awake, heart hammering as another nightmare ripped him from sleep. Once again he dreamt of pulling the trigger. Once again, he saw himself and Gordon cutting Batman down. That horror never left him, the knowledge that he had murdered the boy he had raised into a warrior. Night after night, the guilt gnawed like a rat inside his chest. Sleep offered no mercy, waking gave no relief. He had slain the closest thing he ever had to a son, and every dawn reminded him of that damnation. Worst still, a whisper buried deep in his conscience told him Gotham's veins would curdle without its Dark Knight. He feared he had doomed the city as surely as he had damned his own soul. Chapter 2. Rise of Gotham's New Evil. Gotham shivered beneath a sheet of winter rot. Inside Gotham Mercy Hospital, surgeons worked under harsh fluorescent light, scraping what remained of District Attorney Harvey Dent's charred flesh. Minutes ago, a mobster's hand had hurled acid, a hateful baptism that melted half his face into raw muscle and bone. Politics moved swiftly and cruelly. Whispers already echoed in polished holes that the city needed a prettier champion. When the final layer of gauze peeled back, the nurses recoiled. Harvey stared into the mirror, and something broke. A howl tore from his throat, manic and feral. The ruined side twitched, then smiled on its own. Two-Face was born in blood and chemical fire. With a sick grin, he slashed his attending doctor and staggered out into the night, leaving fear and dripping bandages behind. The acid didn't just take his face, the surgeon gasped. It carved his mind. Down in Park Row, neon flickered against rain-slick asphalt. A lone girl propositioned a shadowed stranger, but before she finished her sentence, claws dragged her screaming into the sewer below. Killer Croc waited in the dark, skin like diseased stone, eyes hungry and unblinking. She barely had time to beg before his jaws clamped down. Flesh tore, bones shattered. Her final scream drowned in crunching teeth. When the Jonathan Crane, once mocked, trampled, humiliated, now strode through the night in ragged burlap and madness, the Scarecrow cornered a former tormentor on a lonely field, dousing him in terror gas. The athlete collapsed, howling at invisible horrors, and Crane carved into his skull while proclaiming himself the god of fear, and beneath them all, entombed in stone and death stink, Batman decayed. Skin sloughed, maggots writhed from rupturing muscle, and yet his eyes burned with undead hunger, his mind shredded to bloodlust. He lay trapped in corpse silence, starving for screams and the pulse of life he could not yet tear open. Gotham bled, and its dead protector dreamed only of feeding. Chapter 3. Escalations. Evening bled over Gotham like a fresh wound. Gordon arrived at Wayne Manor soaked in crimson-tinged rain, his coat dripping like he'd walked through a butcher's alley. In the dim parlor, the two men spoke in hushed, haunted tones about the sin they shared, ending Batman. Gordon's voice trembled under the weight of confession and fear. Gotham was cracking open without its dark sentinel. He listed horrors like reading from a plague ledger. Oswald Cobblepot, Penguin, loose again, slipping from Arkham after turning corridors into slaughterhouses. Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy, bodies piling behind her, 9 dead already, lips blooming death with every poisoned kiss she granted, Two-Face stalking alleys, coin and madness ruling his justice, Scarecrow carving terror into minds and flesh alike, Killer Croc dragging the forgotten into sewer graves. Gotham's veins ran with corpses and panic. Gordon admitted the truth, they both tasted like poison. Only Batman ever kept this tide from swallowing the city whole. Without him, crime swarmed like rats in a drowned basement. His voice cracked as he thanked Alfred for bearing witness to his misery, then vanished into the storm, swallowed by the Red Night. Left alone, Alfred felt guilt coil around his throat like a noose. Had they truly slain a monster? Or had they butchered Gotham's only shield? Batman had killed Joker, a rabid butcher of innocence. Was that damnation or justice? The memory gnawed at him. If Bruce had only tasted the blood of one monster, could he truly be condemned as one himself? A terrible idea took root in his mind, cold and sharp as a shovel blade scraping coffin wood. Perhaps the sin wasn't killing Batman, but leaving him dead. And Alfred, trembling yet resolute, began to plan the unspeakable. Chapter 4. The Dark Fiend returns. Alfred slipped into the crypt like a ghost swallowed by the night. In a shaking whisper, he begged Bruce's forgiveness for the sin he had committed and the darker one he was about to unleash. His frail fingers wrapped around the wooden spike lodged in Batman's dead heart, and with trembling, desperate strength he tore it free. The cursed sliver that pinned him between life and death slid out, and the black, Joker-tainted blood surged once more. Batman exploded out of the coffin like a corpse rejecting the grave. Red embers blazed where eyes once were, his face a skull beneath the cowl, fangs glistening like wet knives in the torchlight. From a throat scraped raw by death, he roared, "You fool, you didn't take my head." He stood reborn, a full creature of darkness, a vampiric nightmare forged in Joker's madness and Dracula's curse. He spat hatred at Alfred for unleashing him, vowing never again to fall beneath a hunter's stake. Alfred, shaking with dread and regret, stammered out Gotham's plight and even bared his throat, offering his own blood. Batman snarled at the insult, hurled him aside like refuse, then dissolved into a swirling crimson vapor and vanished into the night. Breathless Alfred called Gordon and confessed what he had done. Gordon clung to hope that some shred of Bruce might remain to save their city, but out in the bleeding darkness, a twisted bat demon tore across the sky, hunger burning in its veins. Batman had returned, not as a savior, but as a predator starving for the living. Chapter 5. Battle of the Birds. Penguin's crew had cornered a squad of cops in a dingy garage and were gunning them down like trapped animals. Gunfire echoed, streams cut short, then the night split open. Batman plunged in like a starving demon loosed from purgatory, ripping through the gunmen before they could scream his name. The surviving officers staggered to their feet as his monstrous form twisted back into the cloaked, vampiric silhouette they once knew. He towered over Penguin, smothering him in shadow. But Cobblepot sneered, unfazed, drawing his blade-hidden umbrella and spitting accusations of cheap stage magic. Batman's lips curled into a dead man's smile as he hissed that if he was merely a trick, then Penguin was the treat. He tore Cobblepot's throat wide, drinking greedily, then snapped the head free like rotten fruit. Donning the blood-smeared monocle, he shrieked for the gang's whereabouts. Their answer came in screams as he drained them dry, then relieved them of their skulls. The hunt didn't end there. He stormed Penguin's hideout next, crashing in like a rabid predator, and as he descended on them, a savage howl tore from his throat. First your blood, then your heads. Chapter 6. Calling an old friend. The following night, under a sky bruised by storm clouds, Alfred and Gordon ignited the bat signal once more. Gordon's hands shook. He still remembered the carnage. 3 miles of butchered corpses left after Batman tore through the Penguin's men. Yet the beam cut through the dark, and a monster they once called ally answered. He descended like a shadow hungry for flesh, hissed at them to keep their distance. He could taste their blood in the air, hear their hearts thudding like prey. He scanned a taunting riddle left behind by Nigma, then snarled that he was no hero, only a plague, a curse stalking Gotham's veins. He would purge the scum because he craved their life essence. But once the city's criminals were bled dry, nothing would cage him from turning on the living. Gordon opened his mouth to plead, but Batman had already dissolved into crimson vapor and vanished into the night. Chapter 7. Till Death Riddle Us Apart. In the foul, ice-reeking chamber of Gotham morgue, the coroner prepared to cut into the cold body of Cassandra Knight, a murdered college girl. Before the scalpel touched skin, Riddler slipped from the shadows and put a bullet through the doctor's skull. Grinning, he brandished a blade, ready to slice into Cassandra's torso and recover the heroin intact inside her corpse. But then the freezer lights bled crimson. The temperature dropped like a tomb sealing shut. Batman did not enter, he manifested, a cloud of red vapor twisting into shape. Riddler panicked and fired wildly, that the shots tore through empty mist. Terror froze him as he stared at the horror before him, breath shaking as he whispered, "What are you?" Batman's voice crawled like grave soil across skin. "I am the answer to existence, death given hunger in form." Then his fangs sank into Riddler's throat, ripping it open in a gush of red. Chapter 8. End of Fear. Scarecrow cornered yet another tormentor from his college days, eager to drown him in terror before carving him apart. But just as he raised his tools to begin the horror, a dark shape dropped from the sky. Batman seized him from behind, voice dripping cold contempt as he mocked Crane, reminding him that unlike the damned creature Batman had become, Scarecrow still had a choice, and chose murder anyway. Batman crushed the fear gas sphere in Crane's grip, the vapors curling uselessly as he bared his fangs and roared, demanding if Scarecrow truly understood real fear. Before Crane could answer, Batman tore his meat carver from his grasp and slashed clean through his neck. The head hit the ground with a wet thud. Batman whispered, "You understand nothing. You're not fear. You're just food." Then he fed on the twitching corpse, blood slicking his face. Elsewhere, in a dim Gotham dive, Two-Face, Croc, and a cluster of shaken criminals gathered, plotting to beg the law for help against the hellspawn Batman had become. Chapter 9. Killing the Weed. In her lush, forbidden greenhouse, Poison Ivy reveled in her cruel paradise. Bound in vines and dripping with pheromones, men writhed at her feet, limbs broken, minds enslaved, each doomed to die beneath her intoxicating venom-slick kiss. She moved through her living jungle like a queen of decay and desire, feeding her garden with flesh and agony. Then the air curdled. A red fog seeped between the leaves, and the room chilled like a crypt. Batman materialized from the mist, stepping forward, and every plant withered to ash beneath his tread. Roots shriveled, petals blackened, vines rotted in seconds. Ivy shrieked as the pain of her children dying ripped through her veins. Batman's smile was a graveyard grin as he taunted her. She had lusted for him once, yearned to claim him. Now he would claim her, not in life, but in decay. He sank his fangs into her throat, tearing flesh loose and drinking deep. Her blood spilled like sap from a dying bloom, and Ivy collapsed, kissed by death instead of desire. Chapter 10. The Deal. As Alfred and Gordon agonized over whether any fragment of the man they knew still lingered inside the monster wearing the bat, a harsh glow cut through the night. The bat signal flared to life atop the GCPD roof. Hearts pounding, both men armed themselves with crucifixes and rushed upward, clinging to a frail hope. Instead of a savior, they found Two-Face and Killer Croc lurking in the searchlight's glare, grinning like vultures. Two-Face calmly offered an alliance, a twisted pact to bring down the creature stalking Gotham's nights. Gordon refused, jaw tight, but Two-Face pressed, insisting the clock was bleeding out fast. If Batman wasn't destroyed soon, no force on Earth would restrain him. Leaving Gordon to stew in dread, Two-Face vanished with Croc, their warning hanging in the air like smoke from a fresh kill. Alfred wondered aloud whether calling in the feds could help. Gordon shook his head. They'd cage him for lunacy before believing the truth. Alfred whispered that perhaps Two-Face was right, but Gordon silenced him. He asked where the beast might be hiding. Alfred, voice hollow, answered, "The caves beneath the shattered bones of Wayne Manor." Chapter 11. The Blood Warning. Brooding over whether Alfred and Gordon could truly bring him down, the monstrous Batman tore through the sky like a storm of wings and hatred. His senses locked on to Black Mask's hideout, and he plunged toward it with predatory certainty. He smashed through the entrance without a word, then descended into slaughter. Fangs sank into throats, bodies drained until they shriveled, limbs ripped from sockets, skulls torn free as trophies. Blood ran like a spilled river as he worked in eerie silence, wrestling with the question, should he allow himself to be ended or revel in the abyss he'd become? With a single swipe, he opened Black Mask's neck, drinking greedily. When the last heartbeat faded, he threaded the heads of the fallen on sinew, forming a grisly chain, and soared away, clutching his macabre garland, wondering if madness had already claimed him. At the ruins of Wayne Manor, Alfred and Gordon watched him vanish with a writhing swarm of bats. While the beast was gone, they swore to lay a trap. At first light, that man speared the severed heads onto the gates of Blackgate Penitentiary. Inmates stared in paralyzed dread as the sunrise glistened on blood, a brutal warning carved in flesh. Defy the Batman and die. Chapter 12. The Arkham Blood Massacre. At nightfall, the winged monstrosity that was once Batman swept toward Arkham, the nest of the deranged, the rotted heart of Gotham's nightmares. Inside, Professor Arkham calmly instructed our orderly to begin nightly checks, unaware that a crimson mist was already seeping through the halls like a plague called home. Batman materialized in Amygdala's cell first. One savage bite drained the brute dry. A swift twist severed his head. His death howl echoed down stone corridors. The orderly arrived to a vision of carnage, blood pumping, head rolling, and the creature already dissolving back into vapor. One by one, he drifted into every chamber, Mad Hatter, Zash, and the rest, tearing throats, ripping bodies apart, painting walls with the insane. Blood from each room merged into a river, snaking down the corridor, like the asylum itself was bleeding. The orderly nearly lost her mind as horror devoured the night. She fled to Arkham's office, trembling, gasping that every inmate was dead. A thud shattered the dread silence. A decapitated head smashed through the window, landing atop Arkham's ledger. A note hung from its teeth. Arkham unfolded it and read, "Go home. Your work is finished." The final entry of Arkham's journal bled itself across the page in scarlet. Arkham understood. The asylum's purpose had ended. Batman, judge, jury, and executioner slipped in a mist once more and vanished toward his cryptic domain. And outside, Gotham drowned under a fresh storm of blood-red rain. Chapter 13. The Gathering. After the slaughter at Arkham, Gordon arrived grim-eyed at Alfred's door and finally conceded they would have to join forces with Two-Face and Killer Croc if they hoped to end the creature in the bat skin. Soon, Alfred, Gordon, Two-Face, Croc, and their armed followers descended into the black, drooping caverns beneath the ruined Wayne estate. Their one strategy left was sunlight. Nothing else could promise to truly erase the undead horror Bruce had become. They marked the weakest point of the cavern roof, planning to rig explosives there and let the dawn's fury crash down like divine judgment. And it would be Alfred who led him into the trap, the only soul the beast might still hesitate to tear apart. Yet, as they whispered and set charges in the damp gloom, they remained unaware that high above them, clinging to stone like a corpse spider, the rotting Batman crouched in silence, watching every move they made with burning dead eyes. Chapter 14. The Hunt for Answers. Under the cover of night, Batman sought out Ariane, his voice a ragged whisper of death as he demanded to know how a vampire could be truly destroyed. She offered him the standard law, stake, sunlight, holy rites, every textbook method mortals clung to. It wasn't enough. Snarling in fury and frustration, he spat curses at her and burst through the window into the darkness beyond. As he cut through the night sky, a gnawing dread clawed at him. He could feel the hunger tightening its grip, feel his soul rotting by inches. If no one stopped him, he knew he would become worse than Dracula, a walking apocalypse, drenched in blood and terror. Gotham wouldn't just fall, the world would burn, covering above the city he once swore to save. He let out a scream that curdled the very night, a cry torn from whatever human scrap still clung to him, begging in silence for his allies to do what he no longer could. Stop him before he drowned the world in slaughter. Chapter 15. Backgrounds of Blood. It was the hour of reckoning. At first light, the forces of law and the condemned united in the caverns beneath the ruined manor, sworn together in one grim purpose, to end the Dark Knight's undead reign. A towering cross barred the main exit. Explosives lined the stone like buried thunder, and the air stank of fear and stale gunpowder. Alfred stepped forward, voice shaking as he called his former master. Batman's reply came from the shadows overhead, a guttural, hell-forged snarl. He ridiculed Alfred's feeble ambush, boasting he had watched them plot like insects in his lair. In a blur of wings and fury, he dropped from above. Crossbows snapped under Gordon's command, bolts raining like splinters of hope, but they bounced uselessly from the monster's hide. Wood was nothing to this nightmare. Batman zeroed in on the largest threat, Killer Croc. He lunged, trying to drive his fangs into scaled flesh, but Croc's armor held. Croc grappled him, yet Batman's strength was inhuman. He clamped onto Croc's throat, forcing him toward the cliff edge.
Gordon, trembling but resolute, seized the only opening fate offered. With crushing guilt, he launched a wooden arrow straight into Batman's spine. It punched through flesh, a strike aimed for his heart.
Croc roared and shoved, sending Batman spiraling into the abyss below. Alfred's anguished scream shattered the cavern. No! No! Chapter 16. The Two-Faced Deal. As Alfred and Gordon stared into the abyss, grieving the fall of the only man they'd ever trusted, a cold spark of malice lit in Two-Face's eyes. With Batman gone, nothing stood between him and chaos except the two grieving men before him. He gave the order, and bolts sliced through the air. One shaft lodged in Gordon's side, forcing him into the dark to hide, bleeding. Croc lunged at Alfred with murderous hunger. Alfred fired bolt after bolt, but they bounced uselessly off scaled flesh. Croc bellowed that he would tear Alfred apart slowly and feast while he screamed. Dodging behind a rust-rotted car, Alfred evaded those snapping jaws. Meanwhile, Gordon, grim and gasping, picked off Two-Face's men from the shadows, one quiet kill at a time, his gunshots echoing like tomb nails. Alfred sprinted toward the cliff's edge where Batman had vanished. A voice, weak, ragged, unmistakable, whispered his name, pleading. Heartbreaking, Alfred leaned over the drop, and a clawed hand shot up, locking around his throat. Elsewhere in the cavern, Gordon staggered into a dead end. Two-Face loomed over him, gun raised in one hand, blade in the other. No escape, no mercy, only a miracle could keep him breathing now. Chapter 17. Blood of Thy Father. Alfred hauled Batman up from the abyss. The creature still clung to unlife. The arrow had missed his heart by inches, but he was drained, pale as grave dust, barely able to stand. Blood seeped from him in thick, dark ropes. Alfred begged him to rise to reach Gordon before Two-Face and Croc finished their slaughter. To give him strength, Alfred bared his wrist and offered his own blood. If the undead could wear sorrow, it twisted across Batman's ruined features then, a silent agony carved into dead flesh. No heartbeat stirred in his chest, but grief weighed heavier than stone. He ripped the arrow from his body, crimson welling up like tar. He murmured to Alfred that once he had fed, the killing would end, that this would be the last life taken by his hands before justice fell. And with a grim resolve, Batman accepted the price and fed to rise again and stop the monsters waiting in the dark. Chapter 18. The Purge. Croc stalked through the cavern, jaws snapping, hunting for Alfred. Then something bounced across the stone and stopped at his feet. Alfred's severed head, eyes still open in frozen devotion. Croc snarled and looked up just in time to see Batman crouched high above, gripping a jagged stalactite like a spear. With a blur of unnatural speed, Batman hurled himself down and rammed the stone spikes straight through Croc's heart. The reptilian brute collapsed lifeless, and Batman did not drink. Cold-blooded flesh held no nourishment for his cursed veins. Elsewhere, Two-Face leveled his crossbow at cornered Gordon. But before he could fire, Batman materialized behind him like a phantom of vengeance. Two bolts snapped from Two-Face's bow, but Batman snatched them mid-flight. In a voice low and guttural enough to curdle marrow, he hissed. 2 bolts, one for each damned side. Then, with merciless force, he drove both shafts into Two-Face's skull, the points bursting out the far side. Two-Face dropped instantly, silenced forever by the very justice he once mocked. Chapter 19. Farewell, my Batman. Batman yanked the bolts free and drank deeply from Two-Face's corpse, blood dripping down his chin. He told Gordon to abandon his guilt. The blame belonged to him alone. He had fallen into darkness, and Alfred's blood now burned inside him like grief given form. Then he seized Gordon by the collar and raised him off the ground. In a voice heavy with doom and hunger, he promised to drain Gordon and remake him as a vampire. Together, they would build an army and drown the world in blood. ruling over a planet of cattle until every vein ran dry. Humanity, to him, was nothing but meat, waiting to be harvested. He spoke of wiping out mankind entirely, unless, Batman hissed, Gordon killed him first, and stopped the nightmare before it spread. With that, he flung Gordon aside and roared for him to trigger the explosives. Gordon obeyed, detonating the charges. The cavern ceiling shattered. Shafts of sunlight speared downward, holy and merciless. But the blast was too fierce. Stone rained down. A massive slab crushed Gordon's skull, ending him instantly. Batman, the only creature still standing, stared silently at Gordon's broken form. He lowered his head and muttered a prayer that God spare Alfred and Gordon's souls, for they had fought with honor. Alone, the last monster stepped into the light Tanya once embraced. As the sun touched him, flesh flaked away, bones powdered, and his form scattered into nothing. At last, death claimed him, and peace followed. His cape and cowl fluttered softly on the ground beside the fallen. A mournful conclusion, and in its quiet grief, the final sorrow-stained absolution of the Dark Knight. This closes the sorrow-dark tale of the Batman of Earth 43. Tell us in the comments which other Elseworld nightmares you'd like us to unearth. We'll make sure they rise for you. Next month, the complete Batman Vampire Saga will stalk its way into our complete comic book saga playlist. Until then, feast on our daily videos and shorts, and above all, keep the passion alive. Keep reading, keep collecting, and keep the comic flame burning in the dark.